How did this cocktail, favored by these folks, get invented? It was because women like these were tired of being treated like this. So they got into bed with guys like these, who were joined by other guys seeking bigger profits, to create a constitutional amendment that created guys like these, and practically overnight turned gals like this into criminals. Want the details? Find out on this upcoming episode of Happy Hour History.
Oh, bloody hell! We like it. I'll drink to that.
Ladies' Night at the Bar. It's a marketing scheme designed to get women into your bar so that men who want to get into the women will get into your bar. And it's incredibly ironic, considering that for most of America's history, drinking establishments were strictly off limits to respectable women. This is the Bee's Knees. It's a classic Prohibition-era cocktail. Nothing like a little honey and lemon to take the sting out of your bathtub gin. Now, it's a little tricky to make, so hang around for happy hour and we'll show you how to do it. Minus the bathtub gin. Strangely enough, it wasn't until Prohibition, when bars were illegal, that women engaged in public drinking, and they took to it like ducks to water. Stranger still was the fact that women played a major role in bringing about Prohibition. Prohibition was definitely not the bee's knees. We've all heard about Prohibition, but let's try to imagine what it was really like. Starting in January of 1920 and lasting for 13 long, dry years, if you were to buy just a single drink, you were a criminal. And to get that drink, whose quality and even safety was in question, you had to deal with a bootlegger. No, not her. These charming fellows with the funny names. So to drink, you had to support organized crime and its methods. These gangsters flourished thanks to the 18th Amendment. That's right, Prohibition wasn't just a law. It was framed right into the Constitution alongside the Bill of Rights. Except that the 18th Amendment was the only one that ever took away rights instead of protecting them.
What are you doing?
As I said before, women were a major force in bringing about Prohibition. They didn't do it out of spite. For many, it was a matter of survival. From the mid-1800s onward, saloons, the primary watering holes of the day, were the ultimate boys' club, a place where working-class men could go to escape from the drudgery of their 12-hour-a-day jobs. Woman's proper place was in the home, a place where her husband might come home after a night of hard drinking and beat her and the children senseless. Back then, it was all perfectly legal because women had essentially no rights. But a growing number of women said, enough. One of them was Frances Willard. She was president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the preeminent women's social organization of the time. Her rallying cry to women was do everything, and she called for strong anti-rape laws and child abuse protections. Her progressive agenda included an 8-hour workday, government-sponsored education, and better city sanitation programs. But beyond the idealism, the WCTU's main goal was to agitate until our nation of drunkards ran dry. Their slogan was,
"Lips that touch liquor shall never touch mine."
oh, you're such a tease. The WCTU was not alone in the fight. The Anti-Saloon League was formed in 1893 for a single purpose: outlawed drinking in the USA. Wayne Wheeler, a ruthless political genius, sort of the Karl Rove of his day, built the Anti-Saloon League into one of the most powerful and effective political lobbies this country has ever seen. He organized it by congressional districts in rural Protestant churches throughout the country. A Christian coalition, if you will. Wheeler turned temperance into the ultimate political wedge issue, and he crushed any politician who dared oppose his systematic, state-by-state plan to bring about national prohibition. The Anti-Saloon League also received generous funding from the nation's leading industrialists who felt that drinking lowered their workers' productivity. More productivity. As the Anti-Saloon League grew in power, they took the lead in the Prohibition movement. The ladies of the WCTU had to take a back seat, as it were, due to a simple fact. Because women could not vote, they had no real political power. Of course, women realized this too and formed new national organizations that would fight for the right to vote. The National American Women's Suffrage Association was led by Susan B. Anthony, and the more in-your-face National Woman's Party was led by Alice Paul and Lucy Burns. Now, at the time, not everyone was for the idea of women voting. One of the chief opponents was the liquor lobby, who felt, reasonably so, that women would tip the scales toward prohibition. For brewers and distillers, the early 20th century was high times. Yes, the temperance forces were a growing nuisance, but they weren't really concerned because of something you would never expect. Taxes. Yes, they loved taxes, because the US government was making a bundle taxing their booze, up to 40% of its revenues in some years. So the government would never bite the wet hand that fed it, right? Ow! Wrong. In 1913, a 16th Amendment created a federal income tax. The feds now had a new source of revenue. They started taking money away from job creators, and the liquor lobby lost much of its political clout. By 1917, a number of states had voted to go dry, and prohibition was on the verge of reality. But then, something would happen that would change our world forever.
Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums rum.
World War I, and it puts prohibition on hold. Sent by the boatload, tens of thousands of young American men went over there to fight the war to end all wars. Back home, they leave a huge void in the workforce. So guess who filled it? The image of Rosie the Riveter from World War II is iconic, but it was during World War I when women were first employed outside the home in record numbers. As a result, women now had incomes of their own and became independent and modern consumers. When the war ended, Prohibition forces said game on, and an orgy of strange bedfellows, rich industrialists, labor unions, progressives, evangelicals, often with contradictory motives, all came together to support Prohibition. A mélange cruel, if you will.
Fancy.
They all thought it would be the bee's knees. Opposing them were the mostly German brewers. Now, the brewers had already thrown the distillers under the bus, blaming them for the worst aspects of drink. But now, after a terrible war fought against Germany, involving some extremely vile propaganda, well, the German brewers had an epic PR crisis on their hands. The vote in Congress wasn't even close. But it still needed to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. The pro-drinking forces never thought Americans would do it because constitutional amendment meant permanent. It took less than 14 months to ratify it. On January 16, 1919, the 18th Amendment, prohibiting the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquor for beverage purposes, was ratified. And 1 year later, a majority of previously law-abiding citizens soon became criminals. If the road to hell is paved with good intentions, then Prohibition was the Indianapolis 500 Motor Speedway. The Volstead Act, the unwieldy law that enforced the 18th Amendment, had some interesting exceptions. You could purchase alcohol for religious reasons and for medical purposes.
I don't feel so good.
Where have I heard that before?
I'm feeling much better now.
And in one of history's cruelest outcomes, soldiers who served in the only army in Europe that prohibited drinking returned home to a country that had, in their absence, made it impossible for them to have a legal drink.
Up yours.
One last thing. As terrible as Prohibition was, we probably have a better life today because of two of its unintended consequences. First, the male-only saloon culture gave way to a new drinking establishment, the Speakeasy, a place where women and men drank together in near equality. And these women had their own constitutional amendment in mind. We'll talk more about that in part 2, along with how women put a stake in the heart of Prohibition. Then there was what Prohibition did to the cocktail. It's a bit of a mixed bag because most of the best bartenders left the country. But with all the subpar gin, whiskey, and whatever it was called, it forced bartenders to come up with something to mask its awful flavor. Prohibition-era bartenders had to get creative, concocting various mixers as well as resurrecting recipes from older times. More about that in our next segment. But now, it's happy hour, and I have to see a man about a dog.
I want you to have a drink now.
Welcome to Happy Hour. I'm very pleased to have with us award-winning bartender Nathan Gerdes. He was selected as GQ Magazine's Most Imaginative Bartender, and he's going to show us how to make a bee's knees.
Thank you, David. It's an honor to be here. The bee's knees is a great cocktail, lots of great history. And it's one of the cocktails that was created during Prohibition. And there are a lot of those cocktails. The misunderstanding, though, the misconception, is that those cocktails were all made here in the United States. The truth of it is that they were created by American bartenders in other countries. See, when Prohibition started, all these great, incredibly talented bartenders, their jobs became illegal. So in order for them to not get arrested and still ply their trade, they decided to go to where they were allowed to still do it. So they left, they went to Europe, they went to England, they went to France, they went to Cuba, where they were then exposed to all these new ingredients that they never had access to before in the States. So the bee's knees specifically is a cocktail that was created here as more of a rebellious phase during Prohibition, and it's delicious. Classic cocktail, only 3 ingredients like many classic cocktails. It is 2 ounces of high quality London dry style gin.
Now the type of gin, that's very important for this cocktail.
Extremely. The quality of the ingredients used in any cocktail will then dictate the quality of the finished product. So you always want to use the best possible. And Sipsmith is a fantastic choice, very high quality.
But aren't certain gins pretty herbally, very juniper forward?
Absolutely. The category of gin as a spirit is one of the broadest flavor spectrums of all categories of spirit. So it has more flavors or more range of flavor than whiskeys, than vodkas, than rums. And that's mostly because there are so many different botanicals you can use to flavor and to incorporate characteristics into that finished spirit. So a good London dry is a measure of quality that I highly recommend you kind of stick to. So 2 ounces of good London dry style gin, 3/4 ounce of a honey syrup. And a honey syrup's important because, as most of you will know, this does not look like most honey. Honey is very viscous, and if you put it into a cocktail, it'll congeal on the bottom when you add ice because it gets cold, and you'll have a very tart cocktail. You won't have a finished drink. So syrup is important, and it's a very, very simple 1-to-1 ratio, warm water, not boiling, and honey, and from there you get something that is pourable. And then, of course, some good fresh citrus. For my cocktail, this is going to be equal, so it's 3/4 fresh lemon juice. However, everyone has different preferences. Some people like it a little more tart, some people like it a little more sweet. It's entirely up to you. That's a great thing about drinks. You can personalize them. To recap, 2 ounces of London dry gin, high quality, 3/4 ounce of honey syrup, 3/4 ounce of fresh lemon juice. That easy. Add a little ice, and give it a good shake.
And where did the name come from?
The bee's knees is actually a reference, and it's kind of a nice attribution to the Americana culture at the time. And it was a slang from the flappers of the 20s that just meant it was the best of the best. Any cocktail is not a cocktail until it's garnished. So a nice little lemon zest. And there you have it, the bee's knees.
That is fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. Please support our sponsors. Without them, we wouldn't be here. I also want to thank our Indiegogo donors who got us here to this point. And remember to think and drink responsibly. Hey, we are all real lucky because it's bonus cocktail time, and Nathan Gerdes is going to create a cocktail of his own design.
Thank you very much, David. This cocktail is very near and dear to my heart. This is the drink that actually won me the title of the most imaginative bartender in America at a national level competition. It's very simple, very approachable, but also very refreshing and I think quite delicious.
What's it called?
It's called the Hanoi Strip Sour. And it was done in tribute, the name specifically is in tribute to two different cities that I was trying to bring together at the time. The first is Hanoi in Vietnam, that was the city where pho, the soup, was created, P-H-O. And so that is one of my favorite soups. It's revitalizing. And I wanted to embody that, specifically those top notes, those cilantro and jalapeno and the Thai basil, all that, those wonderful aromas coming off the bowl. That's what I wanted to recreate. The other city I was paying tribute to was Las Vegas, the Strip. This is where the cocktail competition was actually being held. So this is 4 ingredients. It's 2 ounces of high quality London dry style gin, a 1/4 ounce of elderflower liqueur, 3/4 ounce of fresh lime juice, and fresh is always very important, and then 3/4 ounce of that specialty syrup that I made in tribute to those top nuts coming off of a bowl of pho.
And you're going to share with us later on the secret recipe.
Absolutely. All the ingredients and the processes in order to make this drink. I'm very open about that.
Great, thank you.
So the drink itself, like I said, 2 ounces of high quality London dry style gin, 1/4 ounce of elderflower liqueur, just to give it those nice floral tones, 3/4 ounce of the specialty pho syrup, and 3/4 ounce fresh lime juice. Now citrus all oxidizes surprisingly quickly. Lime juice specifically oxidizes in about 8 hours. Lemon juice oxidizes in about 10 hours. Orange and grapefruit a little bit longer because they don't have the same kind of citrus acid compounds. But because of that, it is very important to always use fresh and never use pasteurized. The pasteurization process actually kills the acid molecule. So just a pro tip right there for you. A little bit of ice, and as always, a good shake. And then into a glass of your choosing with some fresh ice. A little bit of garnish. So this is 4 ingredients. It's 2 ounces of high quality London dry style gin, a 1/4 ounce of elderflower liqueur, 3/4 ounce of fresh lime juice, and then 3/4 ounce of that specialty syrup. And there we have the Hanoi Strip Sour.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Man, that is awesome. I can see why you won the contest.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And again, remember to think and drink responsibly.
How is this cocktail that symbolizes everything that was wrong with Prohibition connected to women like these, who gained the right to vote, became liberated, took control of their bodies, and used their power to expose the hypocrisy of guys like these, which led to a new deal that finally ended this raw deal? Find out more on the next episode of Happy Hour History.
No man is greater than his mother. No man is half so good. No man is better than the wife he loves. was the world in war and sadness.